So good morning, Boker Tov, on this fine Sunday morning. And, the class, title of the class is a little bit biblical history of Gaza, or Aza, as it's called in the Torah. And its relevance to what's going on, to the battle that we're having now in Gaza and in Israel in general. What's going on over here? What's perhaps the deeper battle that's going on? What's the solution? What's about all this hate and antisemitism all over the world? What's supposed to be our response? These are all questions. I had somebody call me. First, let's say a bracha. Let's say a blessing. And let's give a little tzedakah, a little charity to elicit blessing for today's Torah discussion. So put some money in the pushka. If you have a pushka at home, let's say a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niya bidvaro. I have a lot in my head, my kepala, and I don't even know for sure where this discussion will go to today. There's a lot that we can discuss, and if you have questions, you're welcome to list them here or to send them here in the comments. And if I notice and I have the time, I might try to address. But there's so much that's on all our minds. There's so much that we have to discuss. And on Sunday, it's not like a quick 30-second status or story. We're learning. We're going to learn some Torah. And I figured also that by learning the biblical verses and origins of what Gaza is all about, that will also give us more strength. Because, this is a spiritual, holy battle as much as it is a physical battle. So by learning about it from a Torah perspective, we also enhance the strength of our fighters to do what needs to be done, and also to combat the hate, the blind hate that is going on throughout the world, sometimes intentional and sometimes because of terrible confusion and darkness and lack of education and so on. I had a call. I don't know if I mentioned this in the past in class. Last week we didn't have class. I was at the International Convention. I got a call from a distraught young lady saying that her childhood friends are abandoning her only because she's Jewish. So there's a lot of that going on. Let's learn. Let's talk about this. Let's gather some strength together, and let's connect. Let's connect to Torah. Let's connect to holiness. Let's connect to each other. So let's do it. Okay. You got to begin somewhere. So let's begin with a little history of Gaza, or Aza, as we already find it, ironically, that the struggle and I also want to give credit where credit is due. A significant part of this class is based on a shiur given in Hebrew by Rabbi Shneir Ashkenazi, very known a lecturer in Israel. So, which is in turn based on, of course, commentaries and teachings of the Rebbe and so on. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. Okay, a lot of introductions over here. So let's get to it. So we find the Torah talks about Aza or Gaza already from the first patriarch, and even before that, by the way, as I will explain. The Torah tells us like this, in Bereshis and Genesis, in chapter 21, it discusses already Avram Avinu. It's interesting that the first battle that we find, once God tells Abraham that the land will be yours, the first, I don't know if battle is the right word, but the first strife, the first struggle, the first disagreement we find between Avram, we find, you could say maybe in Hebron, but you find it even more so in Aza and in that area by our first father, by our patriarch, by Avram Avinu. And that goes back to the story of Avram goes, because there was a famine, he settles. First, the story tells us he goes to Egypt, but then after coming back to the Holy Land, he then settles near Gerar. Gerar was the capital city of Gaza, the capital city of the kings of Gaza, which at that time his name was Avimelech. For those of you who are familiar with the biblical narrative, again, and Avram Avinu, who first was living in Be'er Sheva, which is again also in the south, but because of he was living actually in Be'er Sheva, and in Be'er Sheva, the reason why he was living there is because it was a major connecting point between the south, Egypt and so on, and further north. But after the overturning of Sdom and Amorah, there was less people that were there. And Avram Avinu apparently started also another business, so to speak, or another, I don't know if the business is the right word, but another endeavor where he was digging wells. Wells were of the highest precious commodity. He was digging wells. And as he's digging the wells, there's a battle or a fight that breaks out between the servants or the people of Avimelech, and they keep on saying that Avram is stealing the wells from them, or the area where the wells are dug, and it reaches Avimelech, the king's ears. And here I will read from you the Hebrew of what the Torah tells us over there. The Torah tells us in great detail in Genesis chapter 21. Over there, the Torah tells us that Vayichresu bris b've'er shava, they made a covenant. Avram and Avimelech made a covenant in Be'er Shava. Vayokam Avimelech rose, Ufichol sar tzvo, and Fichol is general. Vayishuv eretz Plishtim, they went back to the land of the Plishtim. Now Plishtim, the land of the Plishtim, is basically where Gaza and the expanded area of Gaza is. At that time it was called Plishtim, which is somewhat the origins of the word Palestinians today. Just a sort of a brief history that the name Palestinians have nothing to do really with the current Palestinians other than the geography of the place. After the Mered, after the rebellion of Bar Kokhba, the Bar Kokhba rebellion, which was approximately 2,000 years ago, so the Adrian, the Roman Caesar, decided to change the name of Israel to Palestinai, or Palestinoi, which was a way of connecting Israel sort of to the Philistine area, which, again, I'm jumping a little bit all over the place, but during the times in the Tanakh and the scriptures, we find again and again the area called Plishtim, which is where current the Gaza Strip is, and beyond. But who are this and what's going on? So that's the origins of the name Palestinoi, or which has its source in the biblical Plishtim, which were people that existed way before the whole sort of Muslim religion has started. It's something that's already in the Tanakh and in the scriptures. It's just that later, especially in today's day, that name was adopted. But it goes way back. But the area where the Gaza Strip was what is in ancient Tanakh called the Eretz Plishtim. But no connection sort of biologically. So that should be made clear. Now, the land of Plishtim, at that time when Avram Avinu lived, was, as mentioned, the king of that land was Avimelech. Now, to be clear, and we need to know this, whether, what are the practical today's directives out of this knowledge can be discussed, and opinions can be issued, so to speak. But the truth and reality needs to be known before you even get to that step. The truth about the land of Plishtim is that Avram Avinu, at the time of his disputes with Avimelech, did not, even though he made a covenant with Avimelech, over the wells that he dug, the land was given to him. However, as we find with Hebron and other places where Avram settled, the land was not to be fully inherited by him until, as God told him at the bris ben absarim, at the covenant of the pieces, God said to him, "V'doi revi yishu bohena," the fourth generation will come back here, which is after the Jews came back from Egypt. So the biblical promise to Avram and to his children again and again and again includes the Gaza area as well, meaning, as the Torah clearly states, and it's part of the inheritance of the tribe of Yehuda. In other words, to sum that up very clearly, Gaza is part of biblical Israel, without any question, without any doubt. So, but it was one of the first disputed areas, to get back to what we started to discuss. And it expressed itself specifically, as the Torah tells us, with the digging of wells, which was a precious resource. Now, Avram goes ahead and makes a covenant with Avimelech, as mentioned, but the covenant does not last, and the servants and people of Plishtim constantly violate, and whatever be'er, whatever well Avram digs, they stuff up. A better English word for that. They fill it up with earth, and with that, we find that Avram sort of loses his battle with the Philistines, and we then find it addressed and refought with his son Isaac, with Yitzchak. So here it says, "Vayogar Avram be'eretz Plishtim yomim rabim." Avram lived in the land of Plishtim for many days. They lived peacefully, but the piece of land that Avram dug, or the Be'eros, was not successful. Now, it's interesting in itself that Plishtim, the name Plishtim, let me see where I have this written down. The name Plishtim, hold on a second. The name Plishtim itself, by the way, which again is the origin of Palestine today, of the name of Palestine. So the name Plishtim itself in Hebrew, Plishtim, who was it? Where do we find this? I said it starts from Avram, but in truth it even comes from earlier than Avram. We already find it in the Torah related to Noach. And here we will find another fascinating connection with Gaza, Plishtim, Noach, as I'll tell you in a moment. The name Plishtim, where does it come from? So here we have like this. The Torah tells us, after Noach and the flood, the Torah tells us the following. The Torah tells us, Ubnei Cham, the children of Cham. Do you remember who Cham was? Cham, we see how these things have a deeper meaning, and they go on throughout history until today. Bnei Cham, the children of Cham. Cham was the third child of Noah from the flood. It says that Noah had three children. He had Yefes, Shem, Yefes, and Cham. So Cham had children. Who was Cham, if you remember? It says after Noah came out of the Teva, Noah had a drink. Imagine, he's a year locked up in the Teva. He had life got him, and it says Noah went ahead and he drank. He became drunk, and Cham did something. It says in the Bible that Cham did something to Noah, and there are difference of opinions of what he did to him. One of the opinions of what Cham did to Noah is that he actually castrated him, that he couldn't have any more children. The reason why he did so, Rashi explains from the Medrash or Talmud, that he said that Adam had two sons, Cain and Hevel. They couldn't get along. One killed the other. My father already has three sons and he wants to have a fourth son, so he castrated him. That is one of the explanations. It does say in the Torah, and it's alluded to in the Torah, in the Bible, because it says that when Noach sobered up, he knew what his son did to him. And then he cursed his fourth son. He cursed his fourth son. So from this we derive that what was passed down by oral Torah, that he wanted to prevent him of having a fourth son, so he cursed Cham's fourth son. Now, the Torah over there says like this: Uvnei Cham, who were the children of Cham? Cush, Mitzrayim, Ufut, Uchnoan. And Canaan was the fourth son, the Canaanim, and that's who he cursed. But then the Torah continues and says, Mitzrayim, and then Mitzrayim, who was one of Cham's sons and Noach's grandchild, Mitzrayim Yolad Esludim, Vespasrusim Eskasluchim, Asher Yotzu Misham Plishtim, that from there came forth the Plishtim. Asher Yotzu Misham Plishtim. If I recall, I didn't have a chance to look this up, but what does it mean, Asher Yotzu Misham? One explanation, Yotzu Misham, is that there was incest over there, and that's why they came from there. There was like a forbidden relationship from where Plishtim, the Philistines, originally come from. However, commentaries tell us that what does it mean, Asher Yotzu Misham Plishtim? Because he is a child of Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is the origin of Egypt. So what does it mean? And here, this is fascinating history as it plays out today. It has its effects today. It has its applications, its consequences for today. What does it mean, Asher Yotzu Misham? It's not a normal expression for the Torah to use. The Torah says this one fathered this one was a child of this one. What is Asher Yotzu Misham Plishtim? So, commentaries, whether it's the Radak and the Ramban, he says, the famous Nachmanides and the known commentary, the Radak says, what does it mean, Asher Yotzu Misham? They came out from there, and he says came out from there, from Egypt. So he answers like this, that Egypt was not given to Abraham. Egypt was given to Egypt, to the other children of Noach, in this case to Cham. However, Asher Yotzu Misham Plishtim came out of Egypt, that area that the Plishtim were governing or ruled or inhabiting, and so on. The country that the Plishtim have established is Yotzu Misham. They came out of Egypt. What does it mean they came out of Egypt? Not only that it's a strip that comes out of Egypt, which it is, but it's also something that they conquered that does not belong to them, that belongs to Abraham and his descendants. For whatever reason, God has determined that at that point, as it says before, V'doi Revi, the fourth generation will come back. So it was in the hands of the Plishtim, and throughout the Tanakh, with David and Samson, as we'll get to in a moment, this was a constant struggle, that area, although it was promised to Avram. I hope you are following our discussion. Now, I said that there's a fascinating aspect over here. So here we see already from the beginning of Jewish history that there was the issues with the Gaza Strip, with the Plishtim. Avram Avinu lived peacefully for the most part with Avimelech, but the cost was that he had to give up that his rights. Even though the Torah says that they signed an agreement, call it a ceasefire or peace agreement, Avimelech violated that. Does that sound familiar? And then we find Isaac, and I want to go to another famous personality that we deal with and we find in connection to Asa and Gaza, which is Samson, Shimshon HaGibor, Samson, the holy, and the Samson, the mighty one. We all know who Samson is. Referred to always in Hebrew as Shimshon HaGibor, Shimshon the mighty one. Shimshon HaGibor, the mighty one, the strong one, the hero. So with Isaac, we find a different result as we do with his father. With Isaac, we find that he continues to dig the wells after his father. In fact, it's the only thing we find Isaac doing. And here we find that Avimelech, after seeing Isaac's success, who was highly successful and also lived in that area. Remember this is Beersheba. This is all in that area in the south of Israel. Not Jerusalem, not Tzfat, not Tel Aviv. This is all in that area is where where we begin. Hebron, I mean, it's further east, but they also lived, Yitzchak, Isaac for sure, lived, El Nachal Geror, lived not far from Geror, which is in Gaza. Besides that, even until recent history, until 1929, Jews lived in Gaza and had amazing community there. In 1929, there was pogroms against the Jews, and that's when basically Jews moved out of Gaza. Okay, but let's get back to Isaac. By Isaac, he continued to go ahead and build wells. They came begging him, and here we find the interesting thing. The Torah tells us that again Avimelech made a pact with Yitzchak. But here we find that Yitzchak, although they kept on stuffing up, I know there's a better word, but it slips my mind right now. The be'eros, the wells, Yitzchak keeps on digging until he digs the seventh of the wells, and he is successful. He is successful. Whereas, and again, the Torah says that that's why Yitzchak called that's why this city is called Be'ersheva ad hayom hazeh, which here commentaries ask, the Torah already during Avram's time calls it Be'ersheva with a kametz. So why does the Torah here say that that's why it's called Be'ersheva? Seemingly the name was already given by Avram Avinu. And commentaries answer the difference is the Be'ersheva, the signed agreement, an oath with Avimelech did not endure. Avram Avinu loses his rights to the wells. But the Be'er Sheva, which also hints not only to the oaths of his father, but to the 7 wells that Yitzchak digs and endures and he overcomes, his well and his digging has a victorious effect, and that's why it's called Be'er Sheva, to indicate that Yitzchak's approach was enduring as opposed to Avram's approach. And commentaries point out that the difference is Avram was relying on the good word and the oath of Avimelech. That does not, our enemies have proven again and again that any ceasefire, any agreement, any peace agreement, if that's what you're basing your rights to the land and the holy land of Israel, you're on very, very weak standing, on weak ground. But Yitzchak Avinu didn't just rely on that. Yes, he made an agreement, they came, but he just kept on digging. He kept on doing what he had to do. And it was his approach with the determination and knowledge that this is the land that God has given me. And I'm not basing myself on my agreement with Avimelech. I just keep on digging based on the promise of God that this is my land. It was that attitude that was successful and victorious, and that's why it's called Beersheva today, as opposed to Beersheva, to teach us that we could negotiate from today to tomorrow. Severt, as they say, atoiten bankes, they say in Yiddish. We have to know what the truth is and act accordingly. Okay. That's one point and an important point. Another very interesting point over here, and again, we'll see how much time we have to discuss all of this. As we're learning Torah, and we have to make up for last week, so maybe we'll spend a little extra time studying Torah. Another important point over here is, we spoke about Noach, we spoke about Chum, and now we'll talk about its connection to Shimshon HaGibor, to Samson, which is a very fascinating story in its own right, and we do have limited time, so I'm not going to get into all the detail. However, I will say the following. the Arizal, the famous Arizal, not the Arizal, sorry, Rabbi Yonasan Eibshitz, the Tiferes Yonasan gives us also some Kabbalistic and spiritual insight into the souls of history. And he tells us this very fascinating thing, a connection between Shimshon, Hagibor, Shimshon the mighty one, and the story of Noach and its impact on Gaza. And I want to reiterate again, we're learning about this not just for history knowledge, but by learning the Torah about the region. We want to give spiritual strength to all of us, wherever we're dealing with the consequences of this battle that's going on right now. Call it consequences, call it the hate, the antisemitism. So, with the story with Shimshon, the Tiferes Yonasan, I'm going to assume that if you're listening to this class, you have some knowledge of the whole story of Samson. If you don't, I tell you to read up. I'm not going to go through the whole story of Samson, but maybe just a couple of pointers so that you hopefully, even if you don't know the story of Samson, you could understand what we are studying. So, Samson is born to his parents. His father's name is Manoach. Manoah is how it's pronounced in English, but it's Manoach. We all know that the prophet appears in a fire when they're bringing a sacrifice, and in the fire, the Malach appears, and the Malach, the angel tells them that you're going to have a son Shimshon, and he will be the one that will fight the battles for the Jewish people. But he says there is a condition. He has to be a Nazarite, a special type of Nazir. He's not allowed to cut his hair. He's not allowed to drink wine. And the Tanakh in Shoftim, in Judges, tells us the entire story. And he goes down to Gaza. Over there, the Torah tells us that he sees a Gazan woman. She's not Jewish, a Gazan woman. And he wants to marry her. His parents, of course, object. He wants to marry her by converting her to Judaism. His parents object, but he uses the term that Kihi Yeshara Be'enai, she is pleasant in my eyes. I like her, I love her, she's pleasant in my eyes. He doesn't use the term, I don't think he uses the term he loves her, maybe. I think he just uses the term, she's pleasant in my eyes. And his parents object, but the Torah uses this expression. They did not know, his parents did know, Ki mi Hashem yotza davar, it was actually God's plan that Shimshon should marry a Philistine woman so that he could take revenge and defeat the Philistines. It goes on to tell us details. Eventually, the Tanakh, the scripture tells us the downfall of Plishtim by, again, going after a woman after the first woman was taken away from him because of details that's mentioned in the Tanakh, revenge that Shimshon took upon the Philistines for deceiving him, and he marries the famous Delilah, as it's known now, or Delilah, as it's in the Torah pronunciation, and she recovers the secret from him after much sort of emotional and pressure, and at times when at weak moments in Shimshon's when he was in a weak moment, and we know the story. She gets the secret out of him that it's about his hair, and they murder Shimshon, but he takes his last revenge when many of the Philistines, the leaders of the Philistines, are in the Philistine palace. And we know the story. And over here again, the question is so let me back up for a second. So here there's a fascinating thing that the Tiferes Yonasan tells us. L'chaim. He connects Shimshon and the whole story of Shimshon with Noach. He says Manoach, which is Shimshon's father. Manoach, Shimshon's father, can be also read as Manoach, from Noach. In Hebrew, me means from, like min Noach. Manoach, from Noach. And the Tiferes Yonas tells us in the story of Gilgul Nishamot, of the story of souls, he says that Manoach was a Gilgul, was a reincarnation of Noach. Shimshon originally was supposed to be that fourth son that Noach was meant to have, if not for what Chum did, the great-grandfather, the grandfather of Plishtim, who was, again, if you remember, a child of Mitzrayim, who was a child of Chum, who was a child of Noach. So Chum, the grandfather of Plishtim, prevented Shimshon. So Shimshon, who was supposed to be born from Noach, came down. Manoach was his father. Generations later, to fulfill that which Noach did not fulfill, and to go ahead and to correct by defeating the Plishtims, who was a descendant of Chum. And that is precisely why Shimshon was forbidden to drink wine, because the reason that this all occurred, the reason that what that brought to this was the fact that Noach became intoxicated. He used wine in a way that it shouldn't be used. So for Shimshon to be able to correct, he had to make sure not to drink any wine. So this is all a sort of history that is happening throughout generations, all as part of the journeys of the journey of these souls. So Shimshon was given the task and the strength to defeat the Plishtims as a way of correcting that which Chum's sin, and not allowing Noach to fulfill what Noach had to fulfill. But here the question is, if that's the case, why was Shimshon put to death? Why was he punished to die with the Plishtim? Especially as the Tanakh tells us that Me'Hashem Yotza Davar, that his parents objected to the marriage of Shimshon to the Philistine woman, but the Tanakh, the prophet itself, the scripture itself says that this was God's plan. What was the problem? So the Talmud in Sota tells us the reason why Shimshon did not fulfill his mission is because Shimshon sinned with his eyes. That's why the Philistines nikru es einov. That's why the Philistines sort of poked out or took out his eyes, and his nikama was based on his one eye, but he lost his eyes. Why? Because he sinned with his eyes, meaning that even though Shimshon went ahead and he did what God wanted to do, which is to marry a Philistine, which was part of the plan, but he did so also because he enjoyed it, which means, as the Gemara says and the Gemara indicates, that not only is it important what you do, but it's important why you do it and what your motivation is in doing so, and your motivation affects how you do it as well. So since Shimshon didn't just marry the Philistine because he had a mission to do so, he did it with gusto, in the sense that he personally enjoyed. It was for that reason that he was punished and didn't ultimately fulfill his mission properly. To use the example, to use a story to highlight this point, is a story told that the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, once had Kantonistan. Kantonistan were Jewish children that were in their youth were ripped away, kidnapped from their parents to join the Tsar's army, with the purpose not only of being in the army, but the reason that they were ripped away at such a young age was totally so that they could be disconnected from their Judaism, from their roots, to be assimilated. And at this gathering, they said to the Tzemach Tzedek, they have no choice. They're made to eat non-kosher food, otherwise they just can't survive. And the Tzemach Tzedek said to them, yes, but make sure that you don't lick the bones, meaning you do so because you absolutely need to, so that you could, so that you don't die, but don't enjoy it. It should be something that you're doing only because you're being forced. So what's the message over here? I want to conclude, and this is a discussion unto itself, which I don't know if we have the time to discuss it properly. But here we find a couple of reasons and lessons of what we should take from this whole discussion. One lesson over here is you need to know. It's so important to know the history and what the truth is. What you do with that truth can then be discussed. We can have opinions. Someone walks into your house and kicks you out of your house and just says, it's mine. Okay, what do you do now? How do you respond? Well, there could be various questions and answers. There could be various questions and decisions and plan of how you respond. But you need to know the truth. The truth is that the land of Israel and the Gaza as well is part of the Jewish homeland. Anybody who argues and tells you that Israel does not belong to the Jews and it's occupied, there's not really much to discuss with them. We have no common language. Anybody who still makes that claim does not want to hear the truth. They're just plain anti-Semites, anti-Israel. They, I mean, again, unless someone is totally ignorant, but somebody who is not ignorant but makes that claim, that's not who we have to talk to. But we ourselves have to know the truth. It is so important. I want to maybe take another lesson here, both from Isaac and from Samson. The lesson from Isaac is that we need to act accordingly. Now, Isaac did communicate with Avimelech. He had a discussion with him. He made a pact with him. But in his mind and in his actions, he just kept on going and kept on doing what needs to be done, and he was successful. In today's approach to our enemies that surround us, they will never accept the fact that there is an Israel. They just won't accept it. If they haven't accepted it until now, if they've not accepted it until now, they're not going to accept it. Those who are our sworn anti-Semites, there's nothing you can do about it I want to give another example. I want to give another story that the Talmud says. When we talk about anti-Semitism, people ask, why can't you just leave us alone? Why do you hate us so much? I mean, what's going on over here? We find different reasons and explanations given for anti-Semitism. In the story of Yitzchak, we find the expression "Vayikanu boy Plishtim." The Plishtim were jealous of his success. Many try to explain that the reason why people hate us or hate Jews is because we are highly successful, which we are. Throughout history, wherever we have gone, wherever we have been, we have definitely made the best out of the situation, and we've become very successful financially, medically, scientifically. We've prospered, we've grown, family-wise, cultural-wise. We have prospered under the most adverse and in the most difficult situation. So this jealousy, there's just simple jealousy, but that can't explain every situation of anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism has existed when we were religious, when we were not religious. In Germany, Jews weren't religious per se. Jews were quite assimilated, and yet there was anti-Semitism. We were hated when we had our own country. We were hated when we didn't have a country. We don't have a country. You guys are just imposters over there. Go to your own land. Go back to Israel. Who was it? A reporter. When was it over here in the United States? Go back to Israel. Go back to Poland. Go back to Russia. What in Yiddish? Was mit tut is nicht gut. Whatever we do is no good. So one answer is jealousy. Okay, it's an answer maybe in certain circumstances, not enough. So, interestingly enough, there is a discussion in the Medrash and a discussion in the Talmud, which maybe addresses different answers, because perhaps, and I don't know, even though it's perhaps, there's more than one answer to that question. But by having this discussion, we can try to figure out what's going on over here and what our response should be. It's very important, especially today where so many of us are afraid and lost, and and worried, concerned. When it comes to Egypt, for example, when we were in exile in Egypt, over there it says that in the Torah, in Exodus in the beginning says, Vayakutsu mipnei bnei Yisrael, that the Egyptians, that the Jews were like thorns in the Egyptians' eyes. It's the first time we find sort of recorded anti-Semitism as a nation. And the Medrash says something very interesting. And again, I'm saying there's, I believe, more than one answer to anti-Semitism. But here there's an answer which is worth thinking about. The Medrash over there says that the reason why the Egyptians hated the Jewish people, although it was Joseph, that saved them from famine and saved the land and made Egypt the superpower that it was, they hated Israel, says the Medrash. God brought this hatred, from the Egyptians towards the Israelites, towards the Bnei Yisrael, so that they shouldn't assimilate. It was an outside pressure so that the Jews should not assimilate with the Egyptians. A very interesting point, something for us to think about, which means that if you take that logic or you take that explanation, the answer to anti-Semitism is not to assimilate or to hide or to live like the haters around us so that we're not targeted, as sadly even today we find fellow Jews who are joining the demonstrations and joining the anti-Semitic call, joining the criticism of Israel. So that's not going to do it. In fact, according to the Medrash, while we were in Egypt, that was the reason why anti-Semitism was brought, or anti-Israelites was brought into the world at that time. So that's another reason, something for us to think about. Whether that is the cause at each situation, I do not think so. But it's something to listen to and hear what the Medrash has to say. Now, the Talmud in Tractate Soita gives us another. Now, the Talmud in Tractate Megillah, I believe it is, has the following discussion, and this goes back to the other most famous anti-Semite in history when we talk about the miracle of Purim with Haman and Achashverosh. And this was also a Sikha discussion that the Rebbe had, and it's also very insightful. The Talmud tells us, when discussing the story of Purim, the Talmud tells us the following. Haman comes over to Achashverosh. Haman comes over to Achashverosh. He says to Achashverosh that I want to give you 10,000 aseres alofim kikar kesef. I want to give you 10,000 kikars of silver, which was an enormous amount of money, so that you issue a decree to annihilate the Jewish people. And what does Achashverosh answer? Achashverosh says like this: Hakesef natun loch. Keep the money. I don't need the money. The and the people, the nation of Israel, the Yehudim, as they're referred to in the Megillah, Jews, which is the first time the origins of the Jews, Yehudim. You could do as you wish. And the Talmud uses this analogy. The Talmud says that it's a mashal. It's by way of analogy of a fellow who owned a field, and in the field he had a tail. He had like a mound that was disruptive and didn't allow him to properly plow the field because he always had to go around this mound. Another fellow had a charitz. Another fellow had a hole in the ground, and as a result of the hole or the pit that he had in his field, he couldn't either properly. It also affected his plowing of the field because of this hole in the ground, this pit, this boyer. So the fellow with the boyer comes over and says to the other fellow, look, you have a mound that you have to get rid of. I have a pit. Go ahead, I'll take your mound. It'll fill my pit and we will both be happy. And the Talmud says that this is the analogy of Achashverosh and Haman. Achashverosh had this mound called the Jewish people. Haman had this pit which was in his mind the Jewish people. They both had this problem. Haman says, you know what, I'll pay you 10,000 kikar kesef because I want to remove this pit that I have. And Achashverosh says, pay you? I have this mound that I want to get rid of. Go ahead, do it at no charge. What's the deeper meaning over here? So the Rebbe once explained, why in general do we need, what is this analogy, this parable add to the discussion, to the discussion of understanding the hatred of Haman Achashverosh, antisemitism. What's this analogy of the pit and the mound? Says the Rebbe like this: there are two types of anti-Semites. Achashverosh represented one anti-Semite, which we said before, which is either about jealousy. They just cannot stand that he had Jews. What am I supposed to do with them? They just bothered him. They were just in his way. There's nothing that I just need to get rid of. It's like a mound in my life. It affects my feeling of success. It affects my feeling. It creates jealousy. It's just a mound. It's just in the way. Just get rid of them and everything will be fine. Haman, on the other hand, had a pit. What does the pit represent? The Jewish people, what is their mission? Their mission that God gave us is to letaken olam, to bring a consciousness of godliness and holiness and goodness in the world. Haman was the ultimate egotistical individual. He wanted everybody to bow down to him. The Jews represented humility and submission to a higher power, to something of meaning, something of purpose. We have a purpose. We have a Torah that tells us what to do. Haman says it's all about me. It's all about what I want. It's all about you bowing down to me. He had this deep pit feeling of emptiness within him because of the conscience of a human being, that when they're missing in their life such an important purpose and they see someone else excelling in it, it creates within themselves an emptiness, a vacuum. So Haman and Achashverosh represent two different types of anti-Semitism, of hatred directed to the Jewish people. What was the answer? What was the answer in the Megillah? The answer in the Megillah was not, okay, let's appease Haman, let's appease Achashverosh. Yes, we have to go, we have to ask, we got to do the natural means. The answer was, what was Mordechai's first response? He says to Esther, Leich Knois, gather the Jewish people and let's daven to Hashem, let's daven to God. Our answer to anti-Semitism is to not to weaken or pull back from who we are and our connection to God and our purpose to Torah and so on and so forth. On the contrary, our reaction is to become closer and stronger. And the more we do that, either it will reduce anti-Semitism or it will not. Hopefully it will. Because the more we proudly fulfill who we are and we fulfill our purpose, we don't need to bring the first medrash. We don't need outside reasons to go ahead and give us reminders, outside pressures, outside pain, to give us reminders of who we are. Let's do it from within ourselves. But regardless, and this we can learn from Yitzchak, just to bring this all back together again, regardless, we have to continue doing what we're doing. We have to go ahead, Lech Knois, go ahead, be a proud Jew, connect, learn Torah, do what's right. Even, and again, I'm connecting this to what we learned with regarding to Samson. Samson's downfall was not in what he did. His downfall is that he put his own personal desires and pleasures. So here also, when we're responding to the war in Gaza, we have to do it not because we want to show that we're so mighty and we're so strong. We're doing it because it's the right thing. Not even, yes, we're also doing it to avenge our Kedoshim, our martyrs. But even more importantly, we're doing this as part of our mission and gift to inherit the land of Israel. We don't enjoy it. We don't enjoy, God forbid, when we see any death, be it a Jewish death, and even sadly and tragically, a non-Jewish death, a Palestinian death. We don't enjoy it. We don't want it. We cherish life. I mean, you might have seen that the leader, one of the three top leaders of Hamas, his name is Sinwar, right? He years ago received brain treatment for some sort of brain tumor that saved his life by an Israeli hospital. We don't do this because we want to, God forbid, kill any human being. They keep on telling us about civilian lives. We pine over every civilian life. But we do what needs to be done. As the Talmud says, someone who comes and wants to kill you, you have to kill them first. And we go ahead and we connect to Hashem, we say to him, no different than Mordechai and Esther, and no different than Yitzchak. We go ahead and we march forward. And by doing so, with energy, with connection, with humility, with hope, with prayer, we will be successful. We will come to a time, just like the first battle or strife was related to Gaza. Let us hope that this is the last strife, where the prophets promise us that there will be true peace upon the world. By the eradication of evil, that's when you have true peace. And that's when you prevent deaths that are any death, every death, as the prophets foresee. So let us take the message from all these things together. I know it was a little bit more complicated today, but the message is an important message. And certainly by the merit of us learning about it and the Torah that we're discussing, it will give us the success to against our enemies, whether it be in Gaza or throughout the world. And those who are confused, may God shine a light upon them that they can see the truth and stand at this critical moment on the side of truth, on the side of God, on the side of holiness, on the side of the Jewish people, as the Torah again stresses to both to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob, those who bless you shall be blessed. And unfortunately, the reverse will be the reverse. And we ourselves should be proud, should be happy, joyous with much, not to say that we're not in pain for every life that's lost, but we shall at the same time know that we will be successful, we will be victorious, and we will do so by connecting deeper to our roots, by knowing what it means to be a Jew, by understanding our history, by understanding Torah. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. And I hope this has educated you a little bit more so that you could be more proud of who you are and answer to those who question the legitimacy. And if the question is coming from a place of hate and a place where people know, but you can't change their mind, don't waste your time. That's something you got to pray to God that they should be enlightened. Everybody have a fantastic week.